Please welcome Dr. Herman Mashaba, President of the
Tumelang, molweni fellow South Africans, sanibonani, kuyamore, afshini, da, and good morning. Let me tell you a story. I extend my greetings to all political, business and civil society leaders here gathered this morning or this afternoon, as well as the group of young school leavers from the class of 2024 who have also joined us. We have invited you here today because the discussion about the constitutional objective of transformation in our country is actually stalled. The choice of Apartheid Museum to host this occasion is not accidental. We chose to gather here to remind everyone of where we come from as a country, of the work that must still be done to take South Africa as far away as possible from the horrors of its past and closer to the realization of a democratic vision of a more inclusive society with no one left behind because of the color of their skin, their ethnic or gender identity or religious choice. On one extreme is politically connected elite that link to BBBE as an enrichment program, despite the evidence all around us that BBBE is clearly a failed policy. On the other extreme are those that callously say that we should just get over the past. It has already been 31 years since apartheid ended. They base this position on the bizarre belief that 30 years of a democratic government could balance out so many more years of systemic oppression and dispossession. Imagine this when 31 years of ANC government has deepened racial patterns of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. In between these extremes is the reasonable rational center of our country, the majority, who can tell the difference between the noble objective of transformation and the policies of BBBE that have failed to transform our country. The South Africans know that our country will never become a nation for as long as the legacy of our past remains so clearly evident in the ownership patterns of our present. It is to the South Africans that I speak today when I call for a national dialogue on transformation to develop alternatives to the failed policies of the ANC BBBE. In this regard, ActionSA will be tabling a draft resolution in the National Assembly in terms of Rule 119 to initiate the establishment of an ad hoc committee tasked with a critical mandate to investigate, deliberate, and shape agent reforms at achieving genuine and transformative economic justice. Importantly, we must embark on this effort to bridge partisan divides and build genuine consensus, establishing a dedicated and constitutionally empowered platform that will not merely culminate in rhetoric, but in real legislative reform that advance economic justice in our country, South Africa. Joining us today is our Parliamentary Caucus Chairperson, Dr. Kosidi Tlhapi, who will speak further on this bold legislative initiative right after my speech or my story. The frightening reality is that we can no longer speak about the previously marginalized because the marginalization has not stopped after the end of apartheid. It continues even as I stand before you today through substandard education, failed economic policy, corruption, and the complete failure to manage immigration. In truth, democratic post-apartheid administration had their job cut out for them. Considered widely as the government for the people by the people, they were meant to bring about new policies and the implementation thereof that would over time not only replace harsh racially discriminatory apartheid era laws, but also to ensure that the socio-economic playing fields are leveled to bring about the just, inclusive society that our Constitution calls for. Let me remind you, the preamble of our Constitution states, and I quote, "We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundation for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by the law. Improve the quality of life for all citizens and free the potential of each person and build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations." Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been clear from the start that we could not reasonably expect to build a South Africa described in our Constitution without developing new legislation that would take head-on apartheid-era legislation that had been put in place to crush the potential of and to totally humiliate black people in South Africa. The list is very long, but the following selection of apartheid-era laws, from the oldest to the newest before the end of apartheid, will give you an idea, if you have either forgotten or never knew, of the extent to which apartheid-era governments were prepared to go to achieve their aims. In 1959, they passed the Mines and Works Act. In 1913, passed the Natives Land Act. In 1923, passed the Natives Urban Areas Act. In 1936, Representation of Natives Act. In 1936, the Native Trust and Land Act. In 1945, Native Urban Areas Consolidation Act. In 1946, Asiatic Land Tenure and Indian Representatives Act. In 1949, Natives Laws Amendment Act. In 1950, Population Registration Act. In 1950, same year, passed Group Areas Act. In 1950 again, the passed Immorality Amendment Act. In 1950, passed Suppression of Communism Act. In 1951, Native Building Workers Act. In 1951 again, Bantu Authorities Act. In 1951 again, Separate Representation of Voters Act. In 1952, the past laws, which are still carried at my house. In 1953, Reservation of Separate Amenities Act. In 1953, Natives Labor Act. In 1953, Anti-Education Act, which I'm a product of. In 1954, Natives Resettlement Act, which forced my parents to leave their area. In 1959, when I was born, Extension of University Education Act. That's why I ended up going to University of the North, 350 kilometers away from Pretoria, where I was only 40 minutes away. In 1950, promotion of Bantu Self-Governing Act. In 1960, Unlawful Organization Act. In 1961, Preservation of Colored Areas Act. In 1961, Colored Persons Communal Reservation Act, as I already indicated. In 1961, Urban Bantu Councils Act. In 1963, Rural Colored Areas Act. In 1965, Indian Education Act. In 1970, Anti-Homeland Citizens Act. In 1971, Anti-Homeland Constitution Act. In 1973, Aliens Control Act. In 1985, Colored Persons Education Act. Now, I'm citing this not only to spite or not to spite or as many of you might like to claim for the pleasure of dwelling in the past. I do so to remind you of the pervasiveness of the apartheid legacy that was meant to inform the work the post-apartheid administration had to do or to undo the socio-economic ravages of many decades of apartheid as envisaged in our constitution. What we have seen is that are successive ANC administrations that were expected to constitute a government for the people by the people, becoming one after their governments for the politically connected by their comrades. You needed to be a cadre with tribal credentials or connected to one to seriously benefit from the corrective, transformative ANC policies. Those who did not meet this criteria either had peanuts thrown at them or were entirely left out in the cold. This is where the expression, it is called outside the ANC, come from, with no shame. Under the ANC, we saw the enactment of laws such as Affirmative Action or Employment Equity Act and the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment laws. While the introduction of those laws was noble and aimed at responding to the constitutional call for redress and the transformation of the South African society into a just, freed from the society, freed from the discrimination of the past, the implementation has proven to be poor, weakened by all manner of incompetence and selective application in favor of individuals and companies linked to the people in the political elite of the former liberation movement, the ANC and its tripartite alliance partners, COSATU and the South African Communist Party. As a result, countless opportunities to improve the lives of ordinary Black South Africans, the masses of apartheid-era marginalized individuals and communities, have either been squandered or missed. As I stand before you today, in May 2025, there is unfortunately very little to show for the gains of this transformation loss. What is more, the discussion around transformation has stalled in our country through a spectacular failure of imagination that has led people to believe that our choice is either be or nothing, like an alternative could not exist. This cannot be allowed to continue while 60% of young people remain without the prospect of employment or further studies. ActionSA is for transformation, but not of the ANC failed kind. ActionSA is...
Hold on.
ActionSA is for grassroots empowerment of those discriminated against in the past, but we are against re-empowering over and over again the same connected political elite. So, here today are school leavers who successfully matriculated last year. Their families have heaven and earth for their education. And these young people have worked hard, but yet no one amongst them yet has an opportunity of further studies or employment. And we heard from some of them. There can be no transformation in South Africa until these young South Africans have a pathway to realize their potential. As ActionSA, we will put forward a basket of essential policy levers into this new national dialogue on transformation designed to produce real, measurable change. If implemented as we intend them to be, they will respond directly and effectively to the constitutional call for real threats that has long been ignored. These are, number one, inclusive economic empowerment. 2, social investment grants. 3, housing, land reform and special justice. 4, gender justice. 5, social cohesion. Mindful of the vast expanse and devastating reach of the apartheid era laws I cited earlier, we must be clear. There is no single intervention that will bring about transformation. We cannot afford a sidle approach. Our response must be systematic. It must look not only at the economy, but at the entire society, including access to land, special planning, education, healthcare, safety, security, and many more. ActionSA is not opposed to black economic empowerment. On the contrary, we believe that economic justice is a historical imperative. But we are opposed to the narrow, corrupt, and politically manipulated fashion in which it has been implemented. An approach that has entrenched inequality rather than dismantle it. For decades, the ANC has chased the illusion of equality of outcome, handing wealth to the connected few while leaving the majority behind. What we need now is a model that creates equality of opportunity for all. A model that breaks down the real barriers that keep millions excluded from the promise of freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, let me expand briefly on the 5 levers we propose. Not as a vague ideals, but as a concrete, actionable proposals that will champion in our proposed national transformation dialogue. First, on inclusive economic empowerment. We are proposing a fundamental shift from elite enrichment to grassroots empowerment. At the center of this approach is the Inclusive Economic Empowerment Act, which will establish a bold new vehicle called the Opportunity Fund. This fund will replace the failed BBB framework through which ANC has tried and failed for 2 decades to engineer transformation by enriching politically connected entrepreneurs. Instead of reinforcing inequality under the guise of empowerment, we will focus on real investment in real people. The Opportunity Fund will invest in tertiary education, entrepreneurial stimulus, and public infrastructure in underdeveloped communities, as Dr. Moyo has already indicated. It will fund schools so that my grandchildren in Haramotsi, when they go to school, they must be in a public school, same as there's one in Sentinel Karikiri. We must invest in clinics, broadband, transport, and business hubs that unlock real economic participation. And it will do so in a manner that builds new wealth, not redistributed upward to the elite. We will capitalize the fund through a 5% opportunity fund levy on companies' profits, replacing the 46% currently spent on BBB compliance. SMMEs will be exempted and the levy will be time-bound, 30 years and no more, with clear milestones and regular progress assessments. This bold measure is projected to raise 55.7 billion rands in its first year, growing annually in line with the economy. And unlike BBBE, this money won't go to auditing consultants and empowerment fronting schemes. It will go directly to building the foundations of opportunity. For this to happen, we appeal for economic patriotism that, I guarantee you, will not be linked to a toxic system of patronage. We invite big business to place public good at the center of their corporate action. While we will ensure that possible loopholes for tax avoidance are closed, we will also call for laws that will go after those who try tricks to avoid playing their part. Business auditors who help their corporate clients to dodge their tax responsibilities, together with such clients, will be liable for a minimum of 5-year jail term without the option of a fine. Second, social investment grants. We will preserve the dignity and security that social grants provide, but we will do so with a clear purpose to reduce dependency, not entrenching. Our approach is rooted in the belief that no South African should be condemned to celebrate a life on 370 rands a month. As ActionSA, we will introduce a universal basic income stimulus, a 3-year unconditional cash transfer to adult citizens and permanent residents. Linked to poverty thresholds, the UBIS will pay 790 rands per month in 1 year, in the first year, 1,100 in the second year, and 1,006 in the third year.
Where's it going to come from?
From your taxes.
They pay too much tax. Good.
And growing economy. This program alone is projected to grow the economy by at least 2 percentage points and create an additional 1.6 million jobs.
And inflation? Inflation? Okay, thank you.
Will you want to take over to come and speak?
No, sir. Thank you. Sorry.
No, you're most welcome. We live in a free democratic society. Apartheid is no longer there, so...
I've got 1 or 2 more questions to ask you after. Thank you.
We will also review and expand other grants while digitizing the system to ensure faster, fairer, more transparent access. But let me be clear. The success of such measures must not be judged by how many people remain dependent on grants, but by how many we empower to use the grant system behind altogether. Third, housing, land reform, and special justice. Apartheid special planning remains largely intact. Millions still live far away from work, locked into poverty by the simple injustice of distance. ActionSA will release hijacked buildings and idle public land to expand affordable housing close to jobs. We will fast-track title deed transfers, unlock service sites, and reform exclusionary zoning laws. We'll make it possible for a working-class family to own property, build intergenerational wealth, and live with dignity. Land reform will be accelerated, but it will be done within the Constitution with a clear focus to expand opportunity, not fuel political theater. Access to land must mean access to ownership. and to support and financing that makes it productive. Fourth, gender justice. If you want transformation to be real, it must be gendered. Our economy remains fundamentally unequal for women, especially black women. ActionSA will remove VAT on menstrual and contraceptive products, expand affordable childcare, and force equal pay for equal work. We will empower girls to enter STEM fields, support working mothers, and enforce real consequences for gender-based violence and workplace discrimination. This is not about TQ. It is about removing the structural barriers that prevent women from participating fully and equally in society. Equality of opportunity means ensuring that a young girl in a rural village has the same chance to thrive as anyone else in this country. Fifth, social cohesion. A nation cannot transform if it is divided against itself. We will invest in youth development, mental health services, and community safety so that people have the support they need to contribute meaningfully to their communities. We will promote ethical leadership, encourage a culture of mutual respect, and build national pride rooted in shared responsibility, not manufactured slogans. True cohesion is not built by ignoring our differences, by recognizing the humanity in one another and working together to ensure no one is left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all part of an ecosystem, a fragile South African ecosystem whose various parts must be supported and strengthened to make their fair contribution and to benefit from the whole. If one part remains neglected, it will be just a matter of time before what ails it reaches and affects other parts and the whole ecosystem malfunctions. It is that simple. Like economic empowerment, it's a historic imperative that we shall not shy away from. But it is also an imperative that must be addressed with care, not hatred or retribution. We must also be able to determine key program milestones in its implementation so that it doesn't have to go on forever, ending up having an overall negative impact on society by simply transferring pain from one part of an ecosystem to others. That should be our aim. Our aim must be to bring about sustainable healing so that all South Africans, irrespective of their background, get to experience and enjoy their place under the South African sign. Ladies and gentlemen, let us also face this. None of what we propose here can be achieved while our country's borders remain porous, often managed by corrupt border and home affairs officials who take bribes to let in foreigners who come in traffic. They come into a country to compete with South Africans for the most basic of jobs, economic opportunities, and social services like housing, education, and healthcare. We cannot reasonably expect to heal our legacy past by spreading our limited resources so thin that we try to solve the problems of other countries, which are often led by uncaring leaders who take all the resources of their countries for themselves and push their own people to cross into South Africa to seek better lives. We must protect poor South Africans who are often black from unfair encroachment and competition by foreigners, especially those who come illegally through our borders and immigration services.
Mozambique.
ActionSA will propose positive job reservation tools for South Africans, ensuring that Omni foreigners who bring rare critical skills and investment that create employment for South African, first and foremost, are allowed to come and work or run businesses in our country. Political refugees must be properly vetted in accordance with South African law and our international obligations, and their cases must be treated on individual merit before they are allowed to remain and earn a living in South Africa if they meet the requirements. If we remain shy to engage in difficult conversations or allow failed ANC policies and approaches to continue, I can assure you that we shall keep hearing the same conversation decade after decade, with new groups of frustrated school leavers wondering why the situation remains unchanged. I'm sure you will agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that this cannot be allowed to continue. And that's a commitment that we as ActionSA make a promise to you, that transformation, it's an imperative, and we are going to execute it unapologetically and ensure that future generations are given a better future as envisaged by the Constitution when it was adopted in 1996. I thank you.